Okay, it's 8 o'clock and I'd like to get started. This presentation is called What the Fuck is Volunteer Leadership and Why Should I Get Talked into a Leadership Role? We have a lot of ground to cover. I'm going to try to cover it in about a half an hour. Usually I run over, and hopefully you don't have another must-see TV appointment in a half an hour, and that we're interesting enough to keep your attention a little bit longer. I'm going to talk slowly because I still see lots of people joining, and I don't want anyone to feel left out because they've missed anything in the presentation. Know that this will be recorded and you will be able to view it again and share it with others. Again, I'm Neil Glassman. I'm the Northeast New Jersey City Administrator. Got Karen Ross, who is the Northeast Territory Logistics Lead, who's helping me out as moderator. If you look at your screen on the upper right-hand side, you will see that there's an icon that has a question mark on it. That is the Q&A field. You can go there and enter questions. Those will get spooled up and saved, and Karen will feed those to me at the end of the presentation. So let's get going. So why volunteer leadership? We all know everyone has a role, know it. I interpret that a little bit differently than some other folks at Team Rubicon. One of the ways that I see that is that there is a role for everybody, and leadership is a role. Leadership is not you're the boss of someone or someone is the boss of you. But just like, for example, a sawyer, being a leader is a role that you can play, and know the roles that you can fit into in Team Rubicon. There are many, they are varied, and they match your skills and can match your passions. So you can do the types of things you enjoy enjoy doing, and you can learn to expand those skills and serve not only those who are suffering from, as we're addressing now, food insecurity due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but our core responses of responding to natural disasters. Volunteers are what make this organization click. There's only a fraction of percent of Greyshirts who get paid, and that includes not just the full-time folks, but even just occasional workers, people who will get hired to help with a particular situation. It's a tiny fraction of a percent. But to give you an idea of how important volunteers are in our current structure, if we don't pay attention to the folks at headquarters in the NOC, and we do pay attention to them, but we don't just count them mathematically for this right now, and use the Northeast Territory. My territory is an example, and I'm going to apologize. No, I'm not going to apologize, but I'll be using the Northeast as an example many times this evening. There's 28,000 Greyshirts and only 5 paid staff. But there's 200 volunteer leaders and a significant need for more. Here's our agenda, and we're going to go through a lot of these topics at very high level, and afterwards, as I usually do, anybody who participates and confirms their participation will get my Linkorama, and the Linkorama will indicate places where you can go for more information on all of these subjects. We're going to talk about the Resilient Cities strategy, something you may or may not be familiar with. You'll be at least top level informed on that by the end of this evening. We're going to talk about the metro structure, how we create clusters of local leadership to accomplish our mission. We'll talk about the functional roles of those leaders, whether it's in planning or field ops or logistics or mobilization. We'll talk a bit about what those those folks do in a leadership role and how those may match your interests and what you want to pursue in Team Rubicon. We'll talk about how, if you are interested, and I assume if you're here tonight, you are interested in a leadership position with Team Rubicon. We'll talk about the application process, about onboarding and how that works, the whole process in between. I'll also give you a code word. For those of you who have been at these sessions previously, you'll know that at the end of the session there's a code word. If you provide me with that code word on an email, which can be a response to the dispatch instructions that I sent you in the last couple of days, or a separate email, send me that code word. I'll get you registered, and I will make sure that you are credited for your participation on roll call. But in addition, we have some swag to give away. Just like last week, we've got some Team Rubicon poker chips, and if you're in the Northeast Territory, you can win a Northeast Territory patch. Last but not least, we'll take your questions. If you missed this instruction earlier, if you look at the top right-hand side of the window, you can see that there's an icon with a question mark on it, and that's a place to submit questions. Those will be moderated and fed to me at the end of the presentation. Let's do this. The resilience strategy is based on the concept that disasters all start and end locally. It's not a secret to any of us. It's no surprise that disasters are on the rise. Team Rubicon, in its efforts to become the best disaster response organization in the world, is facing a challenge. How do we make the gap between the time the disaster strikes and the initiation of our response? How do we close that gap? How do we respond as quickly and effectively as possible? And one of the things that we've come up with is the Resilient City strategy. And basically at core, it decentralizes our efforts. It takes our monitoring, our planning, our execution, and our people and places those resources locally to respond locally and respond more quickly. Engagement begets engagement. If there are Greyshirts in your area, whether that's a town or a county or a state, the more those Greyshirts, including yourselves, are engaged in Team Rubicon activities, the more likely you'll be able to be available to activate when there's a disaster that needs response. So keeping busy as a Greyshirt keeps you in a TR mindset and makes you and everybody else more available to respond. And what are those things that we can do to keep busy? And it's not busy work. It's focused events. It's events such as meeting with local emergency managers. It's meeting with the folks at the VFW to find out if we do need to bring outside Greyshirts in for an operation in your locality. Can we use that VFW hall for billeting? It's different kinds of service projects, whether it's helping with a veterans home build or working with the Red Cross on a sound the alarm smoke detector installation. It's training, all kinds of training. We'll talk about training a little bit more, because training is not just what you see on roll call that comes from the training shop, but it's what local leaders determine is needed for the Greyshirts in their community and creating training events for them. And it's also mitigation and recovery operations, things that keep our skills sharp so that we're on the ball when it comes time to respond to a disaster. I apologize in advance to Greyshirts from Puerto Rico, Alaska, and Hawaii for not accurately representing them on the map, but this is the best I could come up with, representing our 6 Team Rubicon territories. Okay. We're moving away gradually from the traditional region model and working more towards territories. But if you take a look at any of these territories, you'll see they're huge. They're diverse. They've got a lot of people and a lot of different kinds of potential disasters on the horizon. So we've broken that down. It's busted down now to what are called metros. And there are two types of metros. There are cities and rural metros. Okay, cities, if you look at the left-hand picture, that's New Jersey, possibly the densest state population in the country. My metro is in that upper right-hand corner, those 5 counties in the upper right-hand corner that if you were to extend the map, to the right of that is the Hudson River, and Manhattan is on the other side there. So you can just kind of extrapolate, if you're not geographically familiar with New Jersey, how dense that population might be. Let's look at someplace else like Maine, where there is a population center in the lower part of the state that is a city metro. But as you move up towards Aroostook County and Washington County, the population is a lot less. So it's a geographically larger with a much lower population density. Whether you're working in an area with high population density, working in an area with really low population density, I'm thinking of Nebraska as might be another example of that. You're looking at having different kinds of structures, different kinds of activities, different ways to engage Greyshirts and solve problems. And the metro structure that is sort of underlies, it's sort of the skeleton, if you will, holding up the resilient city strategy, enables that flexibility at the metro level for creative leadership. Let's look at the numbers, and these goals have been around for a couple of years for Team Rubicon. And just quickly, I mean, we're looking at trying to get 0.1% of the overall population of the United States enrolled in Team Rubicon. A quarter of those who are enlisted, we want to have deployable, ready to serve. And if you were here 2 weeks ago, you learned what those deployability requirements are. T3, that training, and we want about 1/3 of the Greyshirts to have that, would be one or more of the core training skills that one of the core skills that we teach, whether it's core operations, damage assessment, Sawyer skills, etc. We also want about 12% of those who are enrolled and deployable in Team Rubicon, 12% of those who are deployable to also be CNG trained with skills obtained through things like ICS 300 and 400. And then last but not least, 2% of the overall membership to be leaders. Let's see how those numbers might play out. In a community of about 100,000, it looks pretty straightforward. 25 deployable Greyshirts. Okay, we can put together a couple of local strike teams. We've got 8 of those who were previously trained on those foundational skills. We've got 3 people already trained for CNG, and maybe 2 leaders to help put all those pieces together during blue skies. And we're going to talk about the difference between blue skies and gray skies in just a couple of minutes. But then let's look at a larger metro, and forgive me for being a little self-referential, but my metro has nearly 3.5 million people. So the goals in my metro in terms of the number of people who belong to Team Rubicon, the number of people with special training, and all working under as many as 70 volunteer leaders creates a huge task for myself and the rest of the local leadership. Why might we need so many leaders to make this model work? We'll talk about that. But first, let's look a little bit about the leadership role. The leadership role and that chart on the right-hand side can be a little bit confusing, so bear with me. The echelon is basically a geographic identifier. So it's whether it's the territory, the state, the city. You've got the national organization at top, broken into territories, broken into states, broken into cities. Okay. Then you've got functional areas, different activities that Team Rubicon volunteer leaders work in, so that they can specialize in a particular area and amplify their service. Volunteer leaders sort of work in a matrix structure. They're collaborating and reporting to the local leadership, but they're also in a collaborative discussion with those up and down the geographic echelons. So for example, if someone were the logistics coordinator of my metro, he or she would be in contact with the state, territory, and national, perhaps, logistics folks also, directly or indirectly. So there's two lines of communication. One, the geographic, the local responsibilities, and then there's the functional responsibilities. Something that's really important to note, blue skies. Blue skies is when there is no disaster. It's when we're able to practice, train, recruit. Gray skies is when we're responding to a disaster. Okay, right now it seems like everybody is in response to COVID-19, or it could be something like Hurricane Harvey that we were responding to and seemed to take up all of TR Nation, or it could be local operations in your area that are gray skies that are taking your time and effort. It's important to note that when you have a function in Blue Skies Team Rubicon leadership, it does not imply that you're going to have that role on the CNG should there be a local disaster. We keep those things separate. So let's say you're the planning person in a metro and there's a disaster in your area. Yes, you're going to be helping to get that operation spun up, but while it's spun up, you may not be the planning section chief. Those are two different roles. I'm going to go through the next few areas kind of quickly because there's a lot of information. Remember, you will have access to the slideshow and to a video of the presentation when I send you the Linkorama afterwards when you confirm your participation. But the city is really where the action is. It's really where everything happens. The role of the state leadership is more to support and provide resources and grease the wheels, if you will, for the city leadership. At the territory level, it's the roles there are more to be sure that all of the activities are in line with Team Rubicon's mission and that the territory is operating in a consistent, coherent manner, and that the states and cities are not overlapping excessively with their efforts, are doing things efficiently and successfully. At the national level, that's where the systems all and the mission get defined and created and standardized. National is pretty much made up of paid employees. So after this slide, we're going to drop national from the discussion because we're working to define volunteer leadership and your role in it. City leaders are really the tip of the spear of Team Rubicon's activities. These folks are brand ambassadors. They're the ones who are planning and executing events. And by events, like I said, it could be a meeting with another response agency, or it could be a social event to recruit new members. Local leadership has the 360-degree view of what's going on. The local, they're knowledgeable. They know what's happening. You know who else is a member of Team Rubicon. You've got local contacts in government, in other agencies. You're aware of the community needs, and you're working both left and right with those of the other city leaders, and up and down with those in your functional role in Team Rubicon. We're preparing for disasters during blue skies, so we're gathering resources. We know where the Home Depots are that are less likely to get flooded when the river goes over the banks. We know where food can be obtained. We know where the gas stations are and things like that. We may not be executing those as local leaders. We may not be on the C&G, but we're getting all that information available so that when the disaster strikes, we can respond more quickly. How do we know this city leadership model works? This guy, and if you don't know him, this is Jake Wood. He's one of the co-founders and currently CEO of Team Rubicon. I was on a call with him on Tuesday night, and he said something that knocked me off my chair as I was, in the mindset of doing this presentation tonight. Unfortunately, Microsoft, in its wisdom, will not allow me to play a video with audio on their own Teams. So I'm going to just read to you what Jake said. For those of you who know Jake, have heard him talk, try to put it in his voice. The advent of the city-focused leadership structure at the volunteer level throughout this organization is the single biggest enabler that has unlocked the impact that we've had over the last 8 weeks. He's talking about our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Again, the city-focused leadership has enabled the impact that we've had. Jake continued, the ability for us to rapidly decentralize this operational authority, to tell these leaders at the local level, find ways to have impact and engage the enemy. And we've been able to see that happen because we invested in local leadership. I'm amazed by what it's been able to unlock. So local leadership is really what has made Kick the King work. Now, what are some of those functional levels? We've got administrators, communicators, field operators, logisticians, membership folks, planning folks. Generally, they're divided up into having different roles at different levels. The 6 roles you see listed in city pretty much are standard throughout all 3 geographic echelons. Training and wellness get added at the state level. Finance, mobilization, and technology get added at the territory level. However, that's not true everywhere. For example, in our territory, I know that we have mobilization folks at the state level because we just have such dense population in so many places in our territory. I know that other territories, for example, have wellness folks at the city level because they have that availability. So we shouldn't rule anything out about what position might be available at what level, because we try to keep things scalable and try to keep things flexible to meet the needs of the communities that we're serving. Let's talk about administrators. And now, again, I'm not going to read all these slides to you in depth. I'll make them available to you. I just want to give you a flavor of the roles, okay? And the reason I put these 2 guys who are actually paid TR employees is because they set the tone in my territory. Administrators at the city level are not the boss of people. They're the facilitators, they're the coordinators, they're the ones who make sure everything is working for the long term, that, yep, we can figure out what we're doing this month, but what are we going to do next month also? And they give the administrators the opportunity to run their teams, certainly within guidelines, to do the recruiting, for the local administrators to do the mentoring, the planning, the local contact, and the local awareness of Team Rubicon. Communication exists at all echelons. This is someone who is doing both public-facing and internal communications. And something that I'm going to mention now, everybody at every role has some kind of event, okay, that he or she needs to execute pretty regularly, and it could be different each time. Someone in communications may have a meeting with someone from the local press, for example, or have someone from Team Rubicon on the team get interviewed by a local blogger. But on the communication side, this person is helping to amplify our story, get it out both internally and externally, because we have a great story to tell, whether it's in the on television or on social media. Field operations helps to build our bench. They're planning and executing trainings and service projects and the such. They're keeping their eye open for who might be appropriate for mission planning teams, C&G, and other positions that might require additional training for them to be successful in the field. Their goal is to help us figure out what are our current capabilities, what are our deficiencies, what are our strengths, and to make us even stronger. Logistics, yes, it's right there at the top, the custodians of our gear, but it's a whole lot more than keeping track of the inventory. As I said before, logistics is going to also know where the resources are should disaster strike. They're going to help with events. They're going to book rental vehicles, but they're also going to be a wealth of knowledge as to where we can get what we need to do what we need to do, whether it's blue skies or gray skies. Membership has a role that is really important in the activation of new members. That first welcome experience, if it's done properly, makes a Greyshirt stay with us for a very long time and make a strong commitment. They're available for mentoring, answering questions, advising folks on proper training pathways, and of course events such as socials and other engagement or recruiting events. And like pretty much everyone else on the team, on the local team, they're looking to for who might be the next Team Rubicon volunteer leader. Planning is the person that's looking ahead. They're keeping their eye on the weather forecast. They're looking for potential disasters. They're looking for the relationship with community managers and others we need to know who they are, and they need to know us too. One of the most significant events I had was getting a call, being stuck in traffic due to a very, very bad weather situation. It was still, the flooding had just begun, and the local county emergency manager called me to say, Neil, we're going to need Team Rubicon. And 3 days later, we were mucking out homes due to the flood, and we were able to do that quickly because that relationship existed. Training is usually at the state and territory level. They're providing support for the city level training programs. They're creating state and territory level training programs for things of higher complexity, such as cut weekends and things like that. They're managing instructors. They're building the bench of instructors in the territory so that we have the knowledge base and the skills right there in our backyard. And of course, they're collecting feedback to keep improving our training and making it better all the time. Wellness, these are key people because they're not sitting back and waiting for the phone to ring, but they're keeping their ear on what's happening, connecting with members at operations and events, and they know the resources in the communities that they're based to refer Greyshirts for assistance if the direct assistance that they provide is not going to be sufficient. They also work with Assist and other kinds of workshops that help build each Greyshirt's ability to support every other Greyshirt. Our finance folks are unique because they have to master Excel and several really detestable financial pieces of software, while at the same time having super people skills to assist others in making sure that they're submitting their expense reports properly and that their money questions get answered and their money problems in terms of whether it's paying for things for an event or paying for reimbursement for an operation, that things get paid. Just as a note, most Team Rubicon volunteer leaders have access to a PEX card. That's a personal expense card, and that's used. That's a debit card that can get funded for an event and then used for the event. And what gets left over, and hopefully there's something left over because your mother, the donor, would appreciate that. It gets reset to zero and is available for the next event, so that Greyshirts don't have to take a whole lot of money out of their own pocket. Technology is generally at the territory level. At the territory level, the technology folks are helping other leaders master the systems with training. They're also helping with field technology and advancing our digital transformation. As a Greyshirt, you've probably seen over the past 18 months a tremendous amount of change in what we look like online. If you're a leader, you will see some pretty amazing stuff behind the scenes, and you're supported by your technology leaders. Mobilization of the folks who get us out in the field so we can get shit done. They are invaluable. Okay, they assist Greyshirts over the bumps. They're trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle to get people assigned to an operation without knowing what the puzzle is really supposed to look like at the end. They're amazing people, and that we are able to get so many people deployed so quickly to our operations, both locally and national, is to their credit. How do you step into leadership? Okay. It's a pretty simple process. I could have stretched it out into 22 slides, but it's just this one slide. First, talk to your local leaders about what you want to do. And you don't necessarily have to say, oh, I want to do logistics. Oh, I want to do field operations. No. What are the functional things you want to do? I want to train people. I want to create relationships with local emergency managers. I want to create relationships with other disaster response organizations, etc. Okay. You can then, after you talk with your local leadership and they give you an idea of what positions match those things you're interested in, go online, and I'll send that to you in the Linkorama where you can find those, where you can do a little more deeper dive into those role descriptions and know exactly that, yep, that's what I'm interested in doing. Or maybe it's one of these two things. There's an application form that you fill out online. Your application then gets reviewed by the territory leadership. If there's a position that matches your interest, then you go through an interviewing process. If, for example, there's 19 people interested in finance and there's already enough people at the territory level doing finance, you probably won't get the call for that finance role. Which is why it's important to make it clear in your application what are you specifically you're interested in doing, and to have that contact with your local leadership about that, and not just what position you might like to have. And if your application is reviewed, there's a match between your skills, your passion, and available position. And there are plenty of available positions, especially at that essential local metro city level right now. You're interviewed, couple interviews, pretty quick process, and an acceptance decision is made. There's onboarding, which consists of training on technology, culture, everything that Team Rubicon does, in addition to your functional training in the area that you're going to serve, whether it's field operations or mobilization or whichever. So you get the big picture of how to work at Team Rubicon, in addition to the specific functional training to succeed in the role that you've stepped up to. And then after that, you can get shit done. Almost time for your questions. Just a reminder, send me an email with the code word. Everybody can send me the code word local leadership. Send me that code word. I'll make sure roll call shows you attended. You'll get an email with the Linkorama on it, and I'll enter you in a contest. 25 people will win a TR poker chip. If you're not in the Northeast Territory, if you are in the Northeast Territory, you'll win a Northeast Territory patch. It's a nice patch. Now, if you've been to all 4 sessions in the series, please use the code word marathon. You will be given an extra opportunity to win because you've put up with me for 4 hours this month. Okay, I am going to, if I can, let you look at me because I really, last week when I did the go bag, it was at a distance you really couldn't see me, and I've got this great Larry Howard haircut that I'm working on. Okay, first question. What is the time commitment for a volunteer leader? Okay, that really varies. When you look at the descriptions on roll call, you can see that the time commitment may be listed as 5 to 10 hours a week. You might want to look at it a little differently as 10 to 20 hours a month, I think might be the baseline. Everybody sets their own level of commitment. Don't overcommit your time. Okay, work with your local leadership if you're going to be a city leader, and create realistic expectations. Here's the tasks that are given to you, and make a realistic commitment. I know that many at Team Rubicon are spending 10 or 15 hours a week at Team Rubicon. Everyone is always encouraged to wash their socks when it gets to be a little bit too much. Change your socks and wash your socks while you're changing them. So it's very scalable, but I'd say a minimum it's going to be 10 to 20 hours a month. If you can't make that much of a commitment, you may want to rethink committing to be a volunteer leader, but that could be different in your metro. So as I recommended 9 times already, for the 10th time, talk to your local leadership about it. Next question, what is C&G? Good question. C&G is Command and General Staff. They are the folks who run our operations in the field. That's a set of skills and a structure that is a whole nother education. If you have begun the FEMA ICS training with ICS 100 and 700, you'll see you'll get the basic introduction to what the Command and General Staff does, and then you would advance from there. Being on the Command and General Staff is an amazing experience. And if you've been on an operation, you'll see what those folks do, and you'll be able to decide pretty quickly that that team is something you want to get trained and try to be on, or you want to stay as far away from it as possible. Next question, do you need multiple deployments to be in a leadership role? Well, being on deployment certainly helps because it gives you the background that you need in order to serve our mission and to serve your fellow Greyshirts. I mean, the thing about leadership is you get to do cool stuff and help other people, and helping those other people is made easier if you know, if you're preparing them for disaster response, if you've been on disaster response. Is there a hard fast, you have to be on X many deployments in order to be in a leadership role? No. If you haven't been deployed at all, that doesn't mean you shouldn't talk to your local leadership. You shouldn't apply if you're interested, and you'll get the feedback saying, hey, for the role you're looking for, you may want to do this. You may want to assist running a service project, or you may want to take this kind of training because we may not be able to scare up an operation for you to deploy on. But for some roles like field operations, that might be a requirement, again, based on the city and state and territory leadership. If you are a volunteer leader, does that effort interfere with deployments for disaster response locally or nationally? That is a great question. I'm going to have to say the answer is no. It won't stand in your way. Certainly, it's more likely that family and job commitments are going to stand in your way because you're not going to be able to get away to serve if it's something in the distance, and it certainly will not hold you back to volunteer for something that's local, where you could report in the morning and go home and sleep in your own bed at night and go on days that are available. The new deployment readiness structure, which I talked about 2 weeks ago, makes it even easier for people to deploy locally when they're available. And make that availability known, and is actually much more flexible. I'll have a link to that presentation and those resources in the Linkorama also. Next question, and I'm going to have a sip of water. Can you have more than one local leader for a city or rural? Can you team up to spread the work? Well, the metros, whether they're city or rural, are pretty well geographically defined, but are always subject to change. I'm not aware of, in my territory, of metros that have changed, but all of those metros could use more leaders. So, for example, if I was doing my job, and here's confession time, I've done a really crappy job of bringing on board enough local leaders in my metro. If I was to fulfill the goal, I would need 70 leaders in different roles in different kinds of tasks, doing different kinds of tasks, and I'm nowhere near that. So I hope I'm answering your question, but there are multiple local leaders in every metro, whether it's a city metro or rural metro, and those can be subdivided geographically. So in my compact but highly populated metro, I could have administrators in each of the counties, plus administrators in each of the cities, and teams for each of those areas. And in a more rural area, you might have leadership with different role descriptions spread out throughout that geographic area. As a brand new Greyshirt, at what point do you think it would be acceptable to apply for volunteer leadership? Again, I'm sounding like I'm repeating myself. If you haven't met your local leaders, or at least talk to them on the phone or Zoom or whatever, because we're all zooming around these days and we don't have a whole lot of face-to-face contact, do that and talk to them about that. Let them know, I'm a new Greyshirt. Here's why I joined Team Rubicon. Here's what I want to do for my community. Here's what I want to do for my fellow Greyshirts. Here's what I know. Here's what I don't know. Let's have that conversation. If you're brand new Greyshirt, probably you're not going to apply today, but there's no reason not to start that conversation yesterday with your local leadership about your interest in becoming a leader. Where can we find the POCs for each leadership level? Okay, remember, it's a matrix level, a matrix situation. So if you're going to be doing something at the local level, your metro coordinator or your metro administrator, the very top name on roll call on the left-hand column is the person who you can start that conversation with. If it's at the state level, jump one level down to state and contact that person. Say, hey, I'm interested in coordinating training. Okay. Again, starting the conversation locally gets you gets the conversation started. If you, for example, are interested in training, odds are you've already taken some training and have some other trainers that you could talk to get the picture of what's going on, and they could refer you up to the territory level. Next, all these are great questions. These are terrific. Thank you so much. Where would I find a map of the metro? Your local territory leader. I found some buried on a shared drive someplace of the Northeast Territory. I'm not sure I was supposed to, but I found them. I've got them. I used them in the presentation. But your local leadership could tell you the structure of your metro, the geographic structures. Is communications the same as PIO? Close. Communications is PIO during blue skies. So communications we're probably not going to have a whole lot of press conferences unless we have a major event with in our area, maybe in collaboration with others. But communications is the title we give to people who do PIO type work under blue skies. So it's more, as someone called it, story yelling, getting photos of our Greyshirts in action posted on social media, getting stories put in local blogs or local newspapers, as opposed to telling the press what Team Rubicon is doing in response to a disaster, when more likely they're contacting us as opposed to us having to contact them. Is there training for people who want to be on the CNG, specifically the safety officer or public information officer? More great questions. PIO first. There is an online class for PIO. It's a series of there are 4 classes. One that's sort of PIO for non-PIOs, and then there's a 3-part series for PIO. To do that online, it gives you a flavor of what's happening and teaches you a whole bunch of skills. Safety officer, I believe that there's training in the pipeline, but I don't believe there's something that exists right now in for safety officer. It's something that we need. For general command and general staff stuff, on your own, the track would be to take if you've taken ICS 100 and 700, then using FEMA's spectacular numbering scheme, you would follow that up with ICS 200 and 800, and then in-person classes. And we're not offering those right now. Can't wait for those to come back. But in-person classes, usually at the NOC or headquarters, for ICS 300 and 400, which are really the deep dive into CNG. There are also CNG workshops, weekend-long workshops that are offered, and we had a couple scheduled for this quarter that were canceled. So if you're interested in more in CNG, again, your local leadership could tell you once we're outside of the cloud of COVID-19, when those are going to be taking place in your state or territory. Can we have an overlay of training and the member growth chart towards leadership? If you're referring to how are we doing so far, we're doing better, but we have a long way to go. I'm not quite sure I've got that question. Maybe either ask it in a different way or send it to me by email and I can answer your specific question. Okay. We are, obviously, our membership is up to 111,000 Greyshirts. We are behind in terms of percentage deployable by about half or less than what we should be. And certainly we need to keep going on the path that we're on. Things got stuck because we can't meet face to face. It's a lot harder to do this over Skype or cell phone call or Teams or whatever we're using, and we really need to remember that we're going to be able to put that back on track once we're able to meet face to face. All right. What do you suggest if somebody is not sure what position or area to take on, asking for a friend? Happy to answer that. If you're in my metro, if you go to roll call and after you log in on the left-hand side, I should log into roll call for you right now. Left-hand side, there are your point of contacts. Those are your Team Rubicon BFFs. Those are the people who you should feel free to reach out to. Go to the top name on the list. That is the person that is most local, that probably is in most need of your assistance, because we are so in need of to build our local leadership above and beyond anything else, that person can help you clarify where your skills, where your interests, where your passions meet, what are needed either at the city level or the state level. I'm not seeing another question. Oh, wait. Okay. Okay. Another great question. If you have years of experience in a field and multiple deployments with another organization and new to Team Rubicon, would I be able to apply for a leadership role? Yes, and I don't want to give the impression you can not just apply for any reason whatsoever. But certainly, if you're coming with experience, if you're coming with knowledge, that very well could accelerate your acceptance into a leadership position. Again, if that position is available where you are geographically, the person who's going to be able to best answer that, again, is your local leadership. And we've had 150 people attend this session, I think, and I expect tomorrow that there are going to be a couple of dozen local city leaders who are going to say, Neil, what did you do? I had 8 people call me or send me emails yesterday saying they're interested in becoming leaders. If that happens, I'm doing my job, and they're going to finish what they're saying with, thank you, we need them. Okay, if you're interested in a few different positions, do you have to apply multiple times, or can you just list all the positions interested? You can submit one application, but again, remember, this is not a double blind thing. You're not submitting something to just an email address on the internet. You're submitting it to your fellow Greyshirts. So when you submitted your application, you've already had the conversation with your local leader who, if they are aware of you, can have a side conversation that says, hey, this is what this says about this person, but here's some additional stuff you need to know. Also, you will have the opportunity to write a cover letter and have a resume. It's not just fill in the blanks. So you can have that discussion about you're waffling between this and this, but here are the skills I want to apply. Here's the stuff that turns me on. Here's how I can help my community. Here's how I can help my fellow Greyshirts. This is great. If your day job is on a local emergency management staff, would a volunteer leadership position potentially conflict or possibly enhance TR's efforts? I can't see it in any way conflicting. There are several people that I know, not just in my immediate metro, but in the surrounding area, who work for emergency management at the city and county levels, and they are total kick-ass Greyshirts. And I think it more likely, depending upon you, to make it into a 1 + 1 = 3 situation where it can really enhance everybody's efforts, not just TR's efforts. We are only as good as the communications we have with the local emergency managers and other local responders. The sooner we are made aware of what it's one thing to read about it on weather.com, and it's another thing to get that phone call from the emergency manager saying, hey, here's what's happening, here's the neighborhood, here's what we know, let me get you in touch with so-and-so who can help your mission planning team get out there and see what's going on. Thank you all for the questions. I will stick around for a while longer because I see we have well over 100 people still on. Hopefully it's not because you've forgotten to turn Teams meeting off, but with that many people here, I will stick around and answer at least another half a dozen questions. If you have many certs and experience for C and GS already, what's the bigger need path? Volunteer leader, C and G, or some combination. They are not mutually exclusive. You can be a volunteer leader and you can also serve on C and G. Okay, I'm a volunteer leader. I've served on C and G. Okay, I've a volunteer leader, and I've also been deployed to be a swamper on a Sawyer team. The swamper being the person that drags the stuff away to the curb after the Sawyers do their skilled labor. The two being on C and G, the command and general staff, and being a volunteer leader are not mutually exclusive. You can do both. What I said before about, let's say you're the planning coordinator for a city and there's a disaster in your area, that doesn't mean that you will necessarily be the planning section chief of the operation. That, however, does not mean you cannot be the planning section chief or the IC or have some other role on that C&G staff. They're not mutually exclusive. So if you've got the time and you've got the energy, go for both the time commitment of being a volunteer leader and hone those C&G skills. And if you've completed those certificates, make sure they're uploaded to your profile, which was in my How Do You Use roll call session that I'll send you the link to. Okay. Question is about the Palantir program, someone who is familiar with Palantir software and wants to know if there are leadership positions that use the Palantir software to help organize the relief efforts in the command center. Okay, that's a really good question. For those who don't know, Palantir is some software that we use out in the field. We use it to assess homes of survivors that need our help. We use that to track our work. We use that for reporting. We use it for mapping. We use it for planning. We use it for all kinds of stuff. Plus, there are 3 or 4 other software programs that we use for disaster tracking, disaster mapping, etc. What would happen is, if when there are major disasters, there's a call for support at the National Operations Center or working collaboratively remotely with the National Operations Center for people who have software skills. So it's important to make sure that your local and state and territory leadership know what you're capable of doing, but then when the call goes out for that kind of assistance, to put your name and availability in. One of the things that exists now on roll call that didn't exist a few months ago is a list of deployment preferences, the types of things you want to do and the types of things you're able to do. So be sure you complete that. Be sure you put those in your skills area, and be sure your leadership knows that those are your abilities. Just as a sort of a tangent, if you've got that sort of tech proclivity, you may want to consider working in mobilization or working in membership, especially membership, where it would give you the opportunity to help other Greyshirts who might not be as tech savvy as you are. It gives you a good feeling, gives you something to do, keeps you wheels spinning, keeps you engaged in TR, and keeps you at the top of other people's minds when the call comes out for assistance to the NOC. Do I need ICS 400 to apply for a leadership role? I have 300. Yes, 400 has been postponed for a while. No, you don't need anything more than ICS 100 and 700 to be a leader. And I dare say maybe you don't even need that, but I think it's a sign of good faith for you to be deployable in the Team Rubicon classic style and have 100 and 700. So you don't need any additional ICS training to be a local leader. You probably would be a preferred person on the CNG if you've been on a bunch of deployments and you've knocked out both 300 and 400, but that is not mandated. It's really desirable. So in the meantime, though, for CNG, the number one thing and the number two thing behind 300 and 400 is making sure that you get that experience in the field. If you have skills that could be beneficial to leadership, but you have physical limitations that prevent you from being able to do field work, is this an issue? No. I mean, I'll go back to something earlier in a different interpretation of everybody has a role, know it. If your role is to provide remote support for people, if your role is to help onboard new Greyshirts to help them get through the registration process, and if you look, we're all limited right now. I do these trainings face to face. I have a forced limitation right now because I can't go out. I'm over 65. I'm at risk. I get out once a week to go to the early bird special for senior citizens. That's always a trip, but I'm finding a way to do the things that I'm passionate about, which is sharing my knowledge with others, answering your questions, hopefully activating you as Greyshirt leaders. So no, if you've got the skills, again, contact your local leadership and they'll work with you to find the best way for you to apply your skills. I mean, we do have, when we're facing our more typical natural disasters and responding to them, we do have remote operations and remote support. I think we had something like 900 or 1,000 people register for remote support for Operation Kick the King. However, at this point, we haven't found the right applications to put more than a handful of those people to work. In a real disaster, in a real disaster, excuse me, in a response to a natural disaster, that tends to be a bit more prevalent, and more people have that opportunity. This is a good question. I didn't state the obvious. If you ask for a city leadership role, are you assigned to any city where TR decides one is needed? No, you're assigned to the city in which you live. Okay. If you're in city leadership, you serve in that city. If you're in state leadership, you're serving the state in which you live. Okay, you've made that decision by choosing where to live. TR doesn't make that decision for you. We won't move you from place to place. It's all volunteer. After the last session, there was some question about whether volunteers get paid. Volunteers don't get paid. You may get reimbursed for your mileage expenses, but that's about it.